What if the fear wasn't irrational? What if your body was trying to protect you from something that happened before you even had words for it? Today's guest didn't discover she had tokophobia, an intense embodied fear of pregnancy and birth, until the moment she held a positive pregnancy test in her hands and felt her world break open from the inside. Alexia Leachman is the founder of Fearless Birthing, creator of the head trash clearance method, and the originator of the Reproductive Anxiety Disorder, a framework that names what so many women have carried in silence for their entire lives. After her own pregnancy loss, and after finally finding language for a fear that had quietly shaped every choice she'd ever made, she didn't just heal herself, she developed a method. And then she gave that method to the world. What we're talking about today goes far beyond fear of birth. We're talking about the stories stored in your nervous system from your own arrival into the world, from your mother's body, from generations before you. This conversation might give you language you've been looking for a very long time. Welcome to the podcast, The Intersection of Pregnancy Loss, Fertility, Trauma, and Purpose, having the conversations that should have been happening all along. Today, I have with me Alexia Leachman. Alexia is the founder of Fearless Birthing and a leading voice in understanding reproductive fear. After experiencing pregnancy loss and discovering she was living with tokophobia, an intense embodied fear of pregnancy and birth, her personal journey became the foundation of her work. She's the creator of the head trash clearance method and the originator of reproductive anxiety disorder, a framework that explains how fear around pregnancy, fertility, birth, and loss becomes embedded in the nervous system and shapes women's choices and identities. Alexia now works with women and professionals worldwide to bring clarity, language, and real healing to experiences that have long been misunderstood or silenced. Thank you for joining us, Alexia.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Charlotte. It's fantastic to have these conversations. It's much
Yes,
needed.
definitely. And like I said before we started recording, things that I've everyone like there probably, like you said, there are so many women living with these, I don't want to say disorders, but these things that are happening inside of them and not necessarily having the language for it. And the fact that you've been able to put language to what is happening is incredible. And I really do want to dive into your experience, the tokophobia, and RAD. So, did you want to share a little bit about your story?
So for me, I didn't know my whole life that I had tocophobia or anything like this. So picture the scene. I'm 36. I'm in a long-term relationship. I went to university. I was knee deep in personal development things. I've been training in things like NLP and various things. So I wasn't new to the world of the mind, wanting to be a better version of myself. I was all in that. I worked in the health and beauty industry. I was educated. And then I accidentally fell pregnant at 36, and then my whole world changed. Because I'd previously lost my mother to cancer very suddenly within the year prior. And so when my breast started hurting and I went to the doctor, I went, I think I've got cancer. She said, Oh, have you done a pregnancy test? And I was like, why would I do a pregnancy test? That seemed like the most ridiculous proposition ever for a 36-year-old woman. And yet, obviously, it's not, is it really? And so I did the test, and then I saw these two lines, and then my whole world collapsed. But the inside of me broke in a way that I have never, ever experienced. And I just felt like I fell into this pit of darkness. And I didn't know what was going on. But I knew in that moment that I was not okay with this situation. I never knew until that moment hit how I was not okay with this. And that's an experience I've now given a name to, which I call the casse, which is the break. Come from the French casser, to break. I'm half French, so that made sense to me. And it's that moment where, yeah, that part of you breaks inside when you're now confronted with this reality that you are not okay with this situation. And there's another thing that happened to me in that moment, which I've also given a name to, which is delinea. And it's this 2 lines, again, the 2 lines of the pregnancy test, but it's also the 2 lines. And again, I'm going to use a metaphor, a skiing metaphor. And if you've been skiing, you'll know what it's like when you have to keep your skis parallel. And if one ski stops being parallel, you can only keep that for so long before you fall in a mess. And that's what delinea is like. You start as a woman. I looked back and I could start making sense of this. I realized that for a while, let's say a number of years, that I wasn't okay with holding babies. I wasn't that comfortable with family planning and weddings and baby showers, anything that was baby related. I was just not comfortable with that. If anybody asked me to hold a baby, I freaked out. Like at once at work, somebody came in showing off their baby and they handed it to me, and I just had a complete freak out. I had to go to the toilet and started crying. And I was like, what is that about? And I was never able to put a name. Like I didn't understand why I was reacting in this way. So for me, I had this creeping realization that something wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was. It didn't crystallize in me what it was. I couldn't put my finger on it. And I just put it down to me not being maternal. Like that's just not who I am. Just like some people aren't dog people, I wasn't maternal. That's who I am. I've always been like, this is just me. But some part of me knew I wanted to be a mum. And yet I couldn't reconcile the part of me that wanted to be a mum and then whatever the things required to get there, practically speaking, if you like. And so when I saw my pregnancy test, all of that kind of realization came piling in at once. And so then I was faced with the situation. I was like, what the hell is going on? Trying to make sense of my experience. And because of my tokophobia, I wasn't tracking things like my cycle and all of that because I had a huge avoidance over anything to do with reproduction. So the doctor was like, when was your last period? And I was like, I don't know. Like, why would I be tracking my period? Why would a 36-year-old woman be tracking her period? Obviously, but that wasn't in my world. So I had to keep going to a neonatal unit so they could figure out what was going on with the size of the fetus and the growth rate and all of that. And it was through that experience that I found out I lost the baby. So about 2-3 weeks I was pregnant, and then I lost the baby. And then that's when it really started messing up in my head, because in my head, a miscarriage is something that when a woman experiences that, it's awful. And it was awful. I had this huge sense of loss, but the overriding feeling that I had was relief. I was like, okay, dodged a bullet there. Thank goodness for that. And then that was like, whoa, what is going on here? How on earth could you be relieved at a miscarriage? What kind of woman feels relief at a miscarriage? So that sent me into spirals, as I'm sure you can imagine. Having not lost, my mum died like 18 months prior, very suddenly to cancer. So I was reeling in grief and handling that. I was a hot mess. I had severe anxiety. I was just all over the shop. So now with this miscarriage on top of that, I was spiraling hard. And so I put it down to, I was like, well, it's got to be anxiety. It must be anxiety. So I decided I'd deal with my anxiety. Of course it was. Now I realize it was a severe anxiety disorder that I was wrestling with. But at the time I had no idea what was going on. Nobody around me in terms of the medical staff knew. They couldn't point to what was going on. Nobody had any words. Nobody had any, oh, you must be going through XYZ. You did it. Nobody had anything. And I was seeing a lot of professionals at that point because of the tests. And it wasn't any one of those people at any time could have said something to put me on a path and go, oh, it sounds like you've got XYZ. Maybe get support for this. But nobody had anything. So I was left in this lost place thinking I must just be this broken person, this crazy person that, because I'd never heard of women feeling this way about miscarriages. For me, pregnancy had always been this hugely positive, everyone's excited, everyone wants to do it. It's all this thing that all women want. So who the hell am I who feeling like this about it? So that was that's the beginning of my own tokophobia journey. And I did a lot of work on myself and my anxiety so that a year later when I fell pregnant again, this time there wasn't that huge terror that was there. I really, the other part is like one of the huge things that is quite classic tokophobia now looking back is one of the panics I had at the time was, what if he doesn't want the baby? What if I'm going to be a single mum? Now, we'd been in a relationship for 8 years. We hadn't had the baby conversation. So again, that's a huge tokophobia sign. The fact that any aspect of family planning, babies, mothering, all of that was a huge no-go zone in my psyche. And it wasn't even conscious. I wasn't aware that was what I was doing. It just happened to be the way. So yeah, a year later, we had decided that we did want kids, and it was a wanted pregnancy and all of that. And then I was like, I've got to sort this out. And all the help that I was looking for was not touching the sides. Like, I looked at hypnobirthing. I've been through lots of therapy. Nothing was doing anything for how I was feeling. And so I thought the only way I'm going to get through this is that if I've got to find the solution. And due dates don't shift, do they? You have a due date coming towards you. And I was like, the only way I'm going to get through this is because right now all I want to do is have all the drugs, knock me out cold, and just present me with the baby after the fact. I don't want to be living through that experience at all, which is not feasible, really. You have to show up in pregnancy and birth. And yeah, that's when I decided to develop my own way of getting rid of my fears. And I tested it at my first midwife appointment. So I used to be the kind of person that would faint at every injection. I've had so many memories when I was a child. I'm half French, so of my nan feeding me croissants hanging upside down in a doctor's surgery, where I just fainted every time I had a blood draw or any sign of a needle. And so I'm at the midwife appointment, and she starts telling me about all the injections I'm going to have. And at that point, I just like zone out, thinking, "Oh my god, I didn't know I have injections." Okay, and then she says, "Oh, don't worry, you've got some time while I get all the needles ready. Just wait outside." And I was like, "This is not helping." So I'm outside, quietly panicking, thinking, "Holy, I'm going to have loads of injections. I've got to deal with this." And so then what I was playing with, the idea of healing myself, I was like, "Okay, I'm going to test you now. Give me what you got. Let's work on this fear of needles." And so I started doing the clearance work, what is now called head thrush clearance. And then she called me back in, and she went, "Oh, so you're scared of needles, are you?" And I immediately went, "No." And I was like, "Who the hell said that?" Like, what? So now I'm in a situation where hang on a minute, this is new territory, because every single time I've been in a total panic state going for injections, I sat there, I had my 3 injections, we were chatting, I was still conscious, I walked out the office all by myself, and I was like, wow, okay, that worked. And then I went home and wrote down every single fear that I had around pregnancy and birth. Huge list. It was a big A4 thing with more than one column. And I went through every single one and cleared them one by one. And so by the end of my second trimester, I was like, okay, I'm going to change my birth plan for a C-section to a home birth. And then I had the most incredible home birth experience, pain-free, incredible, empowering, all the things that you want out of your birth. And yeah, but again, having been through that experience with my baby now, I still had never heard of the term tokophobia, didn't know what the hell I had. And I only became aware of it like 3 or 4 years later, once I had my second daughter, and people had heard my story, and I was able now with my second birth, that was an incredible birth. None of my fears came back, so it was a way of me testing my method as well. It's difficult to test the method around pregnancy fears when you need another pregnancy to test whether it works. So that took 4 years to come around again. So I was able to see, okay, these fears haven't come back. Now I've got new fears because I'm an old mum and I'm geriatric and I'm going to die and the placenta's going to, all these things that you get told at that point. Yeah, so everything, yeah, all my fears were still gone. Now they were new, but I was in a much better place. And that birth was incredible. So word got out, and I don't know how exactly, but I started getting emails from women I'd never heard of, wanting to know how I did it, how I went from fearful to fearless in such a dramatic fashion. And so then I started getting all these emails, and women want to know I did it. And that's what, at one point I was like, if I get another one of those emails, I'm going to write a bloody book. And so that became my first book, Fearless Birthing, where I shared everything. And the book wasn't ready to publish straight away. So then that became the Fear Free Childbirth podcast while I was still figuring things out. And so I shared initial ideas on the Fear Free Childbirth podcast. And that podcast, I launched it within weeks. It just went insane. I was like, wow. And I hit a nerve with that podcast. There's a lot of women experiencing fear, looking for a fear-free childbirth, found the podcast. And then I was like, I really got to start. So I decided to part my business coaching work at that point, because I had all these women wanting help, wanting to know how I did it. So it led to me creating digital programs, online video, all the things to help these women. And so it pivoted all my work. I parked all my other work, my leadership coaching, my business coaching, and then set off into the perinatal world, which was completely new to me. For somebody that was tokophobic, who was I didn't know anything about babies and motherhood. Like, I'd been avoiding that topic my whole life. So now that I was knee deep in it, it was a big learning curve, let me tell you. But today I've been now helping women get rid of their tokophobia for over a decade. I train professionals, midwives, doulas, therapists, coaches in my methods. I still work with women on their reproductive anxiety disorder, the tokophobia, and now I know tokophobia incredibly well, and I can get rid of it really quickly inside your one trimester if you need it to. If you find out like I did, then we can get rid of it really quickly. But I want to make sure that professionals are equipped with this too. So my mission now is to raise awareness about this among professionals, but also to ensure that women can get the support they need.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that because, like I said, it's not something that is spoken about. And like you said, you create this belief of for yourself, that's just not my path. Motherhood's not my path, but unconsciously not understanding why. That's you never had that conscious even a conversation to say definitely motherhood is not part of my journey. It was that you avoided that entire part altogether.
Yeah.
And then obviously going through the miscarriage, having that sort of infused into all of that as well. Do you find that when you're helping people, obviously through maybe the tokophobia, if have they had experience with pregnancy loss as well? And then obviously going through pregnancy after loss too, there is so many fears and anxieties that come up with that, as well as obviously everything else that you would have been dealing with prior.
Yeah, there's a lot of pregnancy loss, and the difficulty with tokophobia is that people assume that if you have a fear of pregnancy and childbirth, it means you don't want kids. That's not the case at all. I knew I wanted to be a mother on some level, but I just couldn't connect the dots.
Yeah.
Intellectually, obviously, I knew exactly what I needed to do, but emotionally, there was no path there. And so there are lots of women out there that desperately want to be parents, and yet they can't. And they get pregnant and then they can't handle it. So some of them then choose to terminate. So they're terminating a baby that they want, which carries a whole lot of stuff there that's not usual. Many of them might have miscarriages too that just that's the way it goes. So the loss part can be a huge part of many women's experiences around this. Like I've had so many clients that have chosen to terminate babies that they wanted, and that loss is on another level because they have this huge guilt that they can't. The problem is they don't know how to language this and talk about this to their partner, so they'll just tell their partner it's a miscarriage, and they won't tell them that they chose to terminate. There's one lady I work with, and she did this 3 times, and the guilt was just eating her up inside, but she could not handle being pregnant. Every time it's like it's either me or the baby. I can't stay in this state because I can't. It's me or the baby, and I've chosen me. And you can't fault a woman for choosing her. Right? That's absolutely the right thing for her to do. So what we need to do is we need to be there to support them, so that they don't feel that way, and that they can be okay with being pregnant. So that's a very extreme form of tokophobia, where you can't handle the pregnancy itself because it feels too threatening. And this is where so I've recently written a book about tokophobia and reproductive anxiety disorder called Betrayed by Your Biology. And that title was specifically chosen because it's a term that a lot of my clients use where they feel betrayed by their body because their mind, their heart wants to be a mum, but their body will not let them because it feels too unsafe. And this is where the roots of tokophobia are. It's typically rooted in a reproductive experience. And in most of my work, that reproductive experience is your own birth. So it's pre-verbal, it's all in the body. And so naturally, every time you go near anything reproductive in nature, whether that's sex, whether that's even thinking about babies, holding a baby, anything that reminds you on some level of being a baby, the babiness, whatever that reproduction, whatever that is, you cannot go there because your body feels threatened by that. And that's a visceral response. That's why when I saw my pregnancy test, my whole body, it felt like I broke inside because it wasn't even happening. There was no intellectual thoughts going on. I couldn't explain it. And so and the other part of this is, how does a woman realize that she has a fear of pregnancy and birth when she's never been pregnant? How do you know that? If you've already given birth and it's been traumatic, and now you have secondary tokophobia, which is when you have already an experience of birth, then you can point to your birth and go, well, that's why I now have this fear. Whereas if you've never given birth and there's nothing there as a point of reference for you to figure out what the hell's going on. And so none of it makes any sense. So you struggle with sex. You don't want to hold babies. You don't really like baby showers. You don't want to talk about when you're going to have a baby. But none of these dots are being joined up. You can't explain any of it because there's nothing, because it all happened in utero or the day that you were born. And who remembers their birth? So drawing together these dots is really, this is what RAD does, reproductive anxiety disorder, which is the name that I've given to tokophobia. Because actually, what I've realized is tokophobia is just how reproductive anxiety presents itself in that narrow window where a woman is in childbearing age, not just age, but that period where she's likely to be thinking about becoming a mum. So let's say late 20s, mid 30s, that kind of area. So that's the peak where, okay, with babies, let's have babies, motherhood. They're really like, they're on that focus, whether the partners, oh, we've just got married, now's the time for babies, or whether I don't want to leave it too late. Whatever those decisions are, they're happening in that window. And that's where tokophobia can really peak, or at least step for the fourth and go, oh, this is me now, this is. Whereas when you're at puberty and you have body image issues, or because the patterns of tokophobia are present in every key part of the reproductive cycle, where your body is doing something that you are not in control of. So during pregnancy, you don't know if you're going to be balloon, you don't know if it's going to go smoothly for you. You don't know any of that because your body's doing all of it. In birth, you don't know if you're going to have a smooth, easy birth or it's just going to be difficult. Puberty, you don't know how your boobs are going to go. You don't know what your period is going to be like. You don't know any of it. Your body is controlling all of those experiences and you have no say. And then when your body gives you an experience that's really pants and you're like, I didn't sign up. Who's decided this? This is not fair. So you're this betrayal that women are feeling by their bodies the whole time. And then perimenopause comes and slaps you around the face. Like every marker in that reproductive cycle, depending on how that's gone for you, you could be stacking traumas throughout your whole life without realizing. So a lot of women I've worked with, most of them have got a birth trauma, their own birth trauma. Some of them have got puberty trauma of their own puberty. Now, I didn't realize that I had puberty trauma until my teenage girl daughter said to me, oh, how old are you, mummy, when you had your period? And I was like, oh, I have no idea. I don't remember any of it. I don't know how that went. I don't remember the conversation. Can't give you anything. I'm sorry, can't give you anything here. It's a blank. That file's been erased. And so then the healer part of me was like, wow, that means that was traumatic. If I've been, that means that there's something there. So then I started looking for puberty trauma with my clients, and then I started finding it everywhere. And so it made me realize the importance of these key moments in a woman's reproductive cycle, life, from her own arrival through to puberty when her reproductive life starts, to the childbearing years where now it's thinking about children, to when it starts winding down. And then a lot of women come to me during perimenopause when they think they're just about to stop being able to have kids, to make peace with the decision that they decided not to have kids. And what's interesting at that point is when the fear subsides. So now the body there's no chance of you getting pregnant. The threat has gone. And when the threat has gone, they realize now that they did want kids. Yeah. So they need to do the work. They want to do the work to make peace with their decision. So if you give the women the opportunity to do this work while they still have a chance, they can make a decision about wanting to be parents while they've got a chance to sort it out, not when it's too late. So understanding the whole reproductive anxiety disorder and how it affects women throughout the whole of their reproductive lives is really, really important, because let's give women the chance to heal this when they're in their 20s. Like, we can spot this in a smear test. If a woman's at a smear test and she's completely tensed out and really struggling with that smear test experience, chances are she's got tokophobia. So a nurse in that situation could easily talk about that, mention it, signpost her. Doctors could mention this, general practitioners could mention it at any time during those health visits throughout her whole life. This could be spotted, screened, and signposted, and it's not. And women are left to find it for themselves. And then even when they do, they go and see a therapist and they say, oh, this is what I'm going with. And the therapist is like, well, maybe it's perinatal anxiety. Maybe it's OCD. No, it's tokophobia. And therapists need to know what this is too. So this is why I'm doing what I'm doing now, is raising awareness among professionals, because women are going for help and they're not being understood. They're not being heard. They're not being seen for what they're experiencing. And there's no understanding, and therefore they're not getting the support until it's too late. So this is a serious situation that we need to address because we have falling population rates across the world. Here in France, the government's now messaging all 29-year-old women saying you've got to start having babies. So we have a serious situation. And if you have these high levels of fear going on, women they don't want that. And then we have the impact of intergenerational fear and epigenetics. And you think about when medical births really started coming very popular in the 50s. And now, so you now got subsequent generations of women that have probably had traumatic births in terms of their own arrivals. As more, we know that birth trauma rates are going up. So every generation is more traumatized than the next, just from the way that they were born. So tokophobia is baked in to every new generation of women. And it's getting worse. And we see that in the statistics. We see that in the rates and the prevalence rates of tokophobia and anxiety among women. We know that women suffer from twice the level of anxiety as men. Nobody's really given any reason for that. I think that's reproductive anxiety disorder playing out. I believe that reproductive anxiety disorder is the mother of all anxiety disorders, the mother of all anxiety, and that pun, because when I've worked with women, I have many women that come to me, they have a lot of mental health challenges. So typically they'll come with depression and or anxiety and or tokophobia and or OCD. They've got lots going on. But they're coming to me and I'm very specific. I work with tokophobia. And so many times I've had women coming to me, and then even though we've not worked on the OCD, we've not worked on the clinical anxiety disorder, we've just worked on the tokophobia, but we work on that and everything else collapses with it. And it's almost like everything's hanging off the tokophobia, which is why I was like, this is bigger than tokophobia. This is reproductive anxiety disorder, where everything else hangs off this. The OCD hangs off it. Your anxiety is reproductive anxiety disorder. That's what it is. Maybe the men are also having this because of their own birth. We need to rethink how we're looking at anxiety. So that's where coming up with reproductive anxiety disorder, I think we need to expand our scope so that we have a better understanding of what's going on here so we can better support women.
I want to tell you about something I am running Wednesday, the 8th of July, that I need you to be aware of. Whether you are a woman who has experienced pregnancy loss and is thinking about trying again, or you are a practitioner who supports women in that space, this is for you. Because there is a conversation that is not happening in preconception care. What pregnancy loss actually does to the body before the next pregnancy. The birth that was never acknowledged. The nervous system that never got the signal it was over. The layer underneath that, no supplement, no cycle tracker, no standard protocol was ever designed to reach. The research I have been doing has confirmed this gap exists, and on Wednesday the 8th, I'm teaching directly into it. It is called Preconception Readiness After Pregnancy Loss. It is free, it is live, Wednesday the 8th of July at 9:30 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And if you cannot make it live, the replay will be available for 30 days inside my free Facebook community. The link to register is in the show notes. I will see you there. Yeah, that was going to be my next question was what would be like the root cause of so much, and obviously the tokophobia as well. But when you go into obviously the sense of the actual pregnancy itself in the body doesn't feel safe. And of course, then at that point, you can't escape being pregnant.
Yeah.
So then you can almost understand why the women do decide to terminate, because they feel like that's the only way to get safety back into their body.
Yeah.
But then you can understand obviously the repercussions of that, the ripple effect of that decision, because like you said, they do want to fall pregnant, they do want to have a family, but the communication in their body isn't there.
Yeah.
And that, I can only imagine how confusing that would be. because as a human, we try to rationalize everything. We're like, yep, I've got to understand that. I've got to figure out why this is happening. And when you physically can't, and there's no words to put, like you said, even for your experience, there was no words to put to what it was that you were feeling. That just becomes even more threatening, even more
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what is the parts to your method that you have developed, obviously, through your experience? Because you said, like, tokophobia, they focus on one part of a woman's life, but you've managed to figure out a pattern
Mm.
over women's reproductive journey.
Mm.
And obviously, in seeing women, you're seeing that pattern play out.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's probably other anxieties that they've been diagnosed with along the way by therapists, by doctors, and obviously treatment's probably not worked for them in those
Yeah.
spaces as well. But obviously, you're having a lot of women coming through, and for yourself to test your method, to even in your own life to go, okay, you know what, I'm going to put this to the test. I'm going to see if this works. How is what you've created different, apart from obviously the awareness of it, different to essentially what is currently available?
It works with the energy system, and so the energy system is the interface between the mind and the body. And I think that's really important because you can't talk your way out of trauma. We know that trauma, especially when it's in the body, is too deep. So we have a somatic element to the work, but it's a very simple process. I share it in in all three of my books. So Clear Anxiety for Good is the one that recently came out if you want to clear your anxiety for good, but Fearless Birthing if you want a pregnancy spin on that. And so it's a very simple process where you identify the thing that you want to get rid of, the fear, the conflict. So let's say you have a fear of pain, right, which is a very typical pregnancy fear. Then pain becomes a thing that you focus on, and then I share a number of mantras that I've got fill in the blank template. So it's in the book. You just put pain in the blanks, and then you just repeat these mantras to yourself while putting hands in acupressure positions on your face. That's a very simple 5-step process, and it can take you under 5 minutes to do a clearance, which I discovered when I did it with my injection phobia in the corridor. I was also using it throughout my labor. So in between contractions, there was particularly, I told the midwives, I said, if you see me put my hands on my face like this, you then leave me alone because I'm busy. And then even when the baby was transitioning and they were like, we're going to have to take you into hospital because it was a home birth. And I was like, there is no way I'm going to hospital, not this late. I only know how that's going to go. This is not happening. I'm going to do that here. And I was like, okay, what's going on? Why is baby not coming out? And I tuned into what that was. So in that narrow window of literally baby's head was crowning at that point. So we're at the moment where it really should, I had 3 minutes tops to do a clearance. So I did. And baby came out the next contraction because I cleared whatever it was that was holding that body tension that was preventing my body from fully letting go. So it can take 3 minutes when you're in an emergency situation like birth, or a full deep clearance can maybe 30, 40 minutes. And it works very, like when I had tokophobia, I mapped out every single fear I had. I do that exact process now with the women I work with, whether we're working on tokophobia anxiety or whether I'm working on other stuff with business leaders and things. The technique doesn't only work on birth things, it just works on whatever that's going on. And it's about writing out your list of everything that you're not comfortable with, everything that triggers you, everything that makes you anxious, everything that you're fearful of, everything that, whatever it is, you just write it out as a list and work through the list one by one, doing a clearance on it. So it's very simple in that sense. But people still get confused. Am I doing it right? And even though it's simple, people have a tendency to maybe overcomplicate and think they might be doing it wrong when they're not, and they're going to worry they're going to mess it up. And those are all very normal things to feel, but it's essentially a very simple process that bridges, because we're working with the energy system, we're tapping into both mind and body. And that's what makes it so effective and necessary to be working at that level, especially when it comes to birth, because birth is a mind-body activity. You can't do one without the other. You can do all the mental preparation in the world, read all the books in the world, and that doesn't mean that your body's ready to give birth. So it has to be, both mind and body have to be aligned in order for you to have a positive birth that goes smoothly. By working at that level means that you're clearing the fear out, the memory of that out of your body. And that is really, and I think that's why it's so efficacious. The efficacy is what's required when it comes to birth, is because we're able to work at such a deep level. So it's a very deep acting process that's since been expanded significantly. Now we work on trauma, past life trauma, inherited trauma, in utero trauma. So it's expanded to be a very, if you just trained in this as somebody, as a therapist, you'd be able to do a huge amount of work without really needing any other methods. So it's got a huge scope now as a result of the work that I've done. And I've wanted to keep developing it and figuring out, okay, because for me, I realized on my own business journey that I had a visibility issue, even though I have podcasts and all that kind of thing. I was, one minute I'd be out there doing podcasts and videos, and the next minute I'd be hiding. And so I was doing this flip-flopping thing where I was like visible and then not visible, not visible. And then I realized also that there was, for me, for some reason, it was intrinsically connected to financial security. And it's like, yes, on some level, that kind of makes sense. You have to be out there and show up, and that will help you earn more money. But for me, it felt like glued. It was like, these things are like twins, they're stuck together. And it just didn't make sense to me why they were like that. And I was like, I think this is probably in utero. I got a hunch, so I just pulled on that thread. And then I set the intention to clear whatever trauma was there. And then I spent the next half hour like crying, or like like banshee crying, like pain, deep pain. It came out of nowhere. I was like, what was that? And when I muscle tested into it afterwards, I was like, okay, how old was I? I was like, oh, this has got to be pre-verbal. There's no way I don't remember what this was. And then it's like under 3, yes. Under 2, I was like, oh, I got to be, where's this going? I was like, hang on a minute, this is under 0. What's going on here? Oh my goodness, this is in utero. And then I landed on second trimester, and then I knew exactly what it was, because my mother, I was born in the 70s. I know I don't look it. And she was the main breadwinner. And she was worried that if she told her boss that she was pregnant, that she would lose her job. So she was trying to hide her pregnancy. So that's where my visibility security thing got locked in. And so that led me to on a whole new area of developing methods to heal traumas that we don't even know are there. And that gave birth to another part of my work, which has proven to be very significant and a huge part of what I do now. So the in utero experience, in terms of how that sets us up as women, like what our mothers experience, what our mothers went through holding us, carrying us, what that means for our daughters and our sons, like all of that reproductive journey is meaningful. The imprints that get put in when we're in utero, when we're born, like all of those experiences shape us in ways that we don't even know. So many women I've worked with are been healing things that they're carrying that aren't theirs. And when they realize that's not I'm not even clearing my stuff here, I'm clearing my mum's. That's huge. So being able to access those kind of things and release them so that we can be free of all of that is huge. So I went off on one there, but that's
no, so much of what you just said, I was like, maybe I need to invest in your support, because I'm like, just the awareness that I have about intergenerational trauma, and when it's precognitive, pre-verbal, it's all in the felt sense, like it's in our body. We don't have any say in it, and it is essentially our mother's nervous system that we're feeding from. So there is things that I've even pulled out from my mum's journey that I've replayed as a child and now as an adult, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can see that now. I can see those patterns, but I'm sure if I did work with that, there'd be so much more there.
Yeah.
But just going back to what you said, also having the fear in pregnancy and birth. There was something that someone said to me in my pregnancy after loss when I was giving birth, because I was terrified in that whole lead up to giving birth. And they said to me, your body won't allow you to give birth if it's afraid, if it feels threatened. And I didn't understand like what she was saying, but I was like, okay, I need to help myself through this moment of feeling terrified of the birth. And on the day, there was obviously a few things that happened. She got stuck. Then there was I think it was like an hour or something before she actually, so they were like, oh, she'll be out anytime soon. And then it was like an hour or so after where they were like, you need help. Don't push to get her out. And I was like, how am I meant to do that? So then there was a lot of work there. But then when you were saying, obviously, you were clearing fear that was there when you were doing your home birth. And
Mm,
once you cleared it, then your body felt safe. Okay, it can come through, your baby can come through.
mm,
Just looking back over my birth with her, I was obviously there was probably a lot of fear that I was still holding and I didn't realize because I kept losing her heartbeat. And obviously, when you've
mm,
gone through miscarriage and being told there's no heartbeat, to be then told
yeah.
in her birth, oh, we're losing her heartbeat. I didn't it didn't register for me cognitively at the
Mm,
time, but I'm thinking it could have registered in the felt sense of my body that there was something there. There was probably some fear there that my body was like, nope,
yeah.
not going to let not going to let her out yet. And I absolutely believe in hearing what that lady had said to me prior to me giving birth, that your body won't let you because it's such a primitive being. If it's
Mm,
threatened, if it feels like it's giving birth in a unsafe environment, it's not going to allow you to do that. And I absolutely feel like there is validity in that, in being able to clear those anxieties, those fears, that sense of feeling threatened, your body feeling threatened at a nervous system level, at a cellular level,
mm,
to be able to go through and successfully have a healthy fertility journey, have an empowering pregnancy and birth.
mm. Because and you mentioned fertility, and it also, the beginning of that journey, if the body doesn't feel safe to birth a baby, it won't feel safe to let you conceive in the first
Yeah.
place.
It
So,
shuts, yeah,
yeah, everything along that
shuts it all
whole
down.
process will just
Mm.
get shut down. And we know the effect of stress and anxiety on fertility. But what's more interesting is what's going on behind, what's the root cause of that? Why is this woman feeling anxious and
Mm.
stressed? Yes, maybe she's stressed by life and everything, but having expanding the scope, that's why I think RAD is so important, is that when we expand the scope like this, now we're looking at that journey through a different lens, and through a lens that means we can now actually support the woman in a meaningful way because we're looking at this in a sensible manner, as opposed to looking at these isolated incidents and not thinking that there's
Mm.
any connection between all of them. And there absolutely is, and that connection is the reproductive system
Mm.
and how that affects women, which is significant. That's essentially, we were put here because of our reproductive system. That's our raison d'etre. So to deny the importance of this, it is naive, actually. And it's incredible that we haven't stumbled upon this before. But now, for me, it seems so obvious that this is the root cause of so much of what we wrestle with as women, because that is essentially what our bodies are here to do. And so naturally, and then now when we understand intergenerational trauma and the epigenetics, now we've got a whole cocktail of stuff going on within us, these memories that go back generations that are mean that the women today are really dealing with a lot, and they've got a lot, they're healing. The requirement of healing for women today is significant because of what we've inherited through generations prior. And also we're, because of the levels of consciousness that are shifting, our generations are now up for that. We have an insight, we have an awareness around that, and an appetite for it in a way that maybe previous generations hadn't.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that means it's now landed on our plate to do that kind of work. So here we are.
Yes, and potentially breaking patterns, potentially
Exactly.
sharing
Yeah.
that with our kids and
Yeah.
educating them. And this is the thing, this is why I wanted, uh, apart from experiencing the gap myself and witnessing it firsthand in the level of support that was available, I'm not only, and for yourself too, you're not only have done the work for yourself, you've done it, and now we can educate our children. Now we can tell them and have more open conversations about things that weren't spoken about. Even talking about menstruation and everything as a child when I was a kid, you're like, oh no, you can't talk
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. A whole different conversation now with my daughters that I ever experienced. It's crazy.
Yeah. So there's so much, there is, like you said, there's a level of awareness now that people are some more waking up to these conversations to say, okay,
Yeah.
yes, we can have them. And I hope that the children that we're bringing up now is going to be able to have these difficult, the challenging conversations that were challenging in our generation, and be able to also have the conversations around reproductive loss, around fertility, around our menstrual cycles, and also have the emotional intelligence to be able to move through their emotions as well,
Mm.
and not feel so shut down by everything. But when I was a child, I was way too emotional for everyone. I was like, you can't show that. You can't cry all the time. That's just not a thing. And now I think my daughter has inherited that. So it's okay, you can cry, but my husband's no. But it's not only doing the work for ourselves, like we're doing the work now for the future generations to come as well.
Yeah, we absolutely are. And it's interesting the difference between my two daughters. So my first daughter, who I was healing my tocophobia, like in my second trimester. So the first trimester, she was bathed in fear, if you like. And then the second trimester, I was doing the healing, and third trimester, I was good. But first trimester, where all that nervous system's being built, right? So she's got a level of fear that she carries this level of caution and apprehensiveness about herself. And she's wants to work on things, and she recognizes what's going on for her. My second daughter, where I'd done a lot of that healing, like she's a whole different beast. And what's interesting is that she was very, in my second birth, the second pregnancy, she was very late. I had some consultants that were strong arming me into having an induction and all of that kind of stuff. And I was like, there's no chance I'm not doing that. And so she ended up arriving at 42 plus 5 or something like unheard of for somebody of my age at that time. And so she was present in the room, obviously inside me, when she heard consultants saying things like, well, your placenta's going to die at 40 weeks. And so you're going to have a stillborn on your hands if you don't have this induction. You're like, in what world is that okay to say that to a pregnant woman?
No.
Thankfully, I was like able to like bat that away and not feel bullied by that. But she heard that, and I had to do a lot of work on with her after that appointment, because she was that, I think that exacerbated her, made her want to stay inside. But when she finally showed up, like I had to go for my induction at 11 a.m. on the last day. I managed to negotiate with them at 42 plus 6 or something. And she showed up 2 hours before, shot out, arriving in on call. She was an on call birth. So she arrived in the amniotic sac. And I find that very interesting because she essentially arrived with full airbags, and then there's no like, nothing could happen to her. She protected herself the whole way. And so she's got no birth trauma. There's nothing. I've tuned into it. There's nothing there for her. She literally created this situation for herself, which meant there's no birth trauma. So she's a clean slate, if you like. Whereas I know that my first daughter, where I had to manage stuff and the heart rate went down and I had to deal with whatever's going on and threats of going to hospital, she's got a level of trauma going on there and it's interesting how the work that I did, how that's shown up now. And I'm seeing that in my daughters and so this youngest, when you're like, oh, do you want to be a mum? I want 8 babies, mummy. I'm going to have a big family. And the eldest says, no, I'm not really sure about having kids. And I'm like, holy what? Look at that. That's just, and with my awareness about my journey and all of this, I'm seeing that play out with them. It's so interesting. And obviously we can't use that that's just my experience, anecdotal. But nevertheless, with what I've learned, I can't help but feel that there's a lot to learn about that. Those two births were very different, and how that's showing up now in them as women, growing women. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And I can, like I said, I noticed there was things of my mum that I'm carrying, and I know there's things I can see in my daughter. That was me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I had done some work healing on myself before falling pregnant again, but there was still a lot of fear throughout that second pregnancy, because obviously losing a pregnancy, then you are so much more cautious than the second time
Yeah.
round. I made it, I thoroughly enjoyed my pregnancy. I spoke to her all the time. I created a really beautiful bond with her. But then also, on the flip side of that, took myself to the hospital every single twinge that I had because I was so scared
Mhm.
of what that
Yeah.
meant. So there was that fear playing out constantly throughout the entire pregnancy.
Mhm.
And I had done some work. I can't say I had done a
Yeah. Yeah.
lot. Like I had done a lot, but not obviously to the point where all of that was, the anxiety and the fear was gone.
Yeah.
So to be able to have someone on the other side of you that can see that and to be able to go, okay, I can help you through this, whether that is the tokophobia, whether it is to
Yeah.
have an anxiety free birth. It's not, like you've said multiple times, it's not readily available. And you may get validation to some degree from a therapist or counselor, but and a lot of the time from the medical system, like you said, they don't really join the dots for you. They'll
No.
just put a band-aid over each one of them and
Mm.
potentially go, okay, you can do that for that one and that for that one, but not actually see the whole picture and go, this is actually a holistic thing that's
Yeah.
happening. Let's treat you in a holistic way.
Yeah. And
Um,
anxiety is dealt with. Like the narrative around anxiety is let's help you manage that better.
yeah.
No, I'm done with managing. We've got enough on our plate with life without managing something else. Let's just get rid of it. Let's just go all in for a couple of months, 3 months, get rid of the anxiety, and then move on with our lives and be happy. I'm done with this narrative that you have to cope. And
Mm.
here are some top tips for managing it. And let's do some breathing exercises. And let's do. No, that the reason that you have anxiety is because your nervous system's under fire. Let's get to the root cause of why your nervous system feels that way and get rid of whatever your nervous system is terrified of right now so that you don't feel like you're under fire and your anxiety can go off. So that's another thing that drives me insane, which is why I brought the book out, Clear Anxiety for Good, because I drives me mad that there's all this that we're perpetuating as a situation where we're maintaining people's anxiety, we're helping them to hold on to it, and they're trapped in that state. And so they're never really able to move on and let go of whatever it is that's holding them back in their lives. And if you can just get rid of something, and that's what head trash clearance is able to do, is we just get rid of it. But I hate repeating myself and having to go over the same old ground. Once I've done, that's the great thing I love about the head trash clearance method is once you've cleared it, it's gone. Like you don't have to redo that. You don't have to tap it again. Like every time you face a situation, you don't have to revisit it. You just one thing done, and that means you can actually move on, grow as a person, like evolve, and become the next iteration of yourself. And that's why the reason why I wanted to bring that book out is because I'm just so annoyed that there's so much of the system that is about maintaining a status quo that is not for the best interests of all of us individually, and that we as women have got enough to be doing. We've got enough accumulated trauma and stuff to deal with, and the mental load that we have to handle. There's enough there. We don't have to keep holding on to these mental health challenges that simply don't serve us, that don't need to be there. So this is why, for me, with the work I do, I've made everything DIY. Yes, you can work with a practitioner, but if you just want to do this on your own with the book, go off and get the book and do it on your own. Like you can, because we need to be empowered to manage our own mental and emotional health and not feel tethered to a therapist or a doctor or feel like you can only move forward if you've got next week's appointment and you can't do anything until next week's appointment. No, we need to just empower people so they can actually deal with themselves. And if they want the additional support from somebody that knows how to navigate this, and yeah, sure, professionals are there for them. But ultimately, we need to take that power back with our own mental and emotional health so that we have that inside of us, because that's where true sovereignty lies. And this managing thing, it does not play into the sovereignty piece at all. It's the opposite of that. And I want people to be free to choose how they behave, to have the flexibility to respond to whatever situations in front of them in the way that best serves them and their family, and to have that ultimate freedom inside of them. And you can't do that if you're constantly batting emotions away and fears away and just feeling like you're like a tennis practice with all the balls coming in constantly and you haven't got room to breathe. That is not a way to live your life. So let's put that way of living behind us. That's what I'm all about.
Yes, that sounds, like you said, much more liberating
Yeah,
and empowering to be able to do it, to live life that way and not be consistently worried or consistently unsure of how those situations are going to go. Will I react? How will I react? Is my anxiety going to come up?
yeah,
So you're like almost on eggshells in your own life, like all the time,
yeah,
in all the different situations. To be able to not have consistently like going back to therapists and counselors, like you said, as a crutch, take your power back, be able to do that for yourself and not have to worry about
yeah.
how the situations are going to play out in your life. because you're not even anxious anymore.
And it is, but also things might not turn out the way you want. Thinking about loss, you might face another loss. You might, but also your parents are going to die. Like things, crappy things happen. And the thing is, once you've done that inner work, you can handle whatever comes your way. It's not going to crush you. And that's the thing, is that we carry a lot of fear around these situations. And because we think when that happens, because it was so difficult for us in the past, I'm never going to be able to cope, I'm not going to be able to handle it. But actually, you do handle it. You do find the strength. You have got the capacity to deal with that. But when you're in a weakened state because of your anxiety, you don't feel like you have got the capacity. So if we can build our internal capacity to deal with life, then we carry less fear about what the things are that could go wrong, because we have a fundamental trust in who we are and what we're able to deal with. That means that, okay, I might not like that, I might not want that might be really horrible, but I know I'll get through it. And that knowledge that you have your own back, that you can get through it, that's what carries you through, because you'll never be able to. Doing the inner work doesn't guarantee that everything's going to be like sunshine and buttercups. It just means that you'll be able to deal with it, and you'll be able to come out still smiling despite what darkness you might have to walk through in the process, because it doesn't guarantee any of that. It just means that you can handle it. And that's freedom, isn't it? Knowing that you can handle whatever comes your way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't control anything external.
No,
You can't control life. The
exactly.
only thing you can control is you
Yeah.
and how we choose to respond to the situations. And essentially, if you can allow your body to feel safe enough to respond and not have knee-jerk reactions, then, like you said, you build this capacity for that, and you have a lot more clarity in making decisions and being
Yeah.
able to move through and potentially see what is available to you to help you through those moments.
Yeah.
I could literally talk to you forever, but how can people find you? You've obviously written a couple of books, or 3 books. Where can people learn more about you?
So any head trash work, you can go to head-trash.com. That's the main, like, that'll direct you on to whether you want to go to the Fearless Birthing website, if you've got an interest in pregnancy and birth, if you want to learn more about head trash clearance and as a professional and train, or if you just want to clear your own head trash using the tools and the resource and things like that. So headtrash.com is a good place to go. If you want to visit my personal site, alexialeachman.com, if you want to work privately or have any healing work through me, then that's the best place to go. And then the books, Clear Your Anxiety for Good, or Betrayed by Your Biology, is the book on RAD and tokophobia. So that is a perfect book for professionals, for therapists, for women who think they might be suffering from it, to have a better insight as to what tokophobia and reproductive anxiety disorder is. I think that'd be a good first call. And then for those professionals listening that really want to know more about tokophobia and RAD, I do have training. I've got a 1 hour free training that I do for professionals so they can better understand tokophobia and RAD. I've also got more in-depth training. So I'm very committed to helping the professionals better support women. So that's really when I want to put and of course, if you want to train in fearless birthing or head trash clearance, then that's available. You can see that on any of the websites you go to. So yeah, so that's a little bit of a tour of what you can find out.
I love that you call it head trash as well. Like, it is essentially head trash, like what we're going through, being able to clear. And like you said, clear not only our stuff, but sometimes stuff that isn't ours.
Yeah.
So I'll
And
make sure.
trash is neutral. Like the
Yeah.
thing about trash is, if I came round to your house and looked in your kitchen and looked at your rubbish bin, I wouldn't stand there all judgy, go, "Oh my God, Shauna, look at all that rubbish you've got in your bin." You'd be like, "Yeah, I went to the supermarket, there's packaging, we threw things out." Like, it's just like everybody's got a bin, right? So that's the same with our head trash. At some point, our head trash served us really well when we were kids. If you had to fight for whatever. But now it's old code. It's just bloating your system. You just need to get rid of it. So we've all got it. We just need to recognize it and get rid of what no longer serves us. So that's why I chose that term, because it's so neutral and we shouldn't feel shame about any of it, because we've all got it. We just need to be, okay, yeah, I got it. I want to get rid, and here's how you get rid of it. So that's why I picked that name.
Yeah. I can just picture like a little trash bin in my brain. I've put stuff in over the years. Just got to take the trash out.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Alexia, for everything that you have shared today, diving into tokophobia and RAD, because, like I've said, it's not thing, not terminology I've heard before. And
Mm.
like you've said, you've created the RAD, reproductive anxiety disorder, as
Yeah.
a whole.
Framework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And there's a white
tokophobia.
paper that I've written making the case for RAD. So that's freely available to download from Fearless Birthing website. Just go to fearlessbirthing /white paper and you can just download it and read it there. And that's really so I can partner with those that might want to do research around this, better understand it, because I really want to help educate professionals as what's going on here so we can start changing policy, changing mental health support, really changing things at a fundamental level so that we can change how things are for women. So that's what that white paper is about.
Yeah, amazing. I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes as well so people can easily find you and what you've done. But I have really enjoyed speaking with you today about all of the things Tokophobia and RAD. And I encourage anyone who's listening, if anything has resonated with you, to reach out to Alexia through one of the links, whether it is just finding out more information, whether it is about furthering training, or to connect with you personally. So thank you again, Alexia, for
Thank you,
being a part.
Shana. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Me too. I loved the conversation, every bit of it. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you to all that have listened in. If this episode was valuable to you, I invite you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and I look forward to supporting you on the next episode.